When it comes to adding a thick layer of intrigue to the story, this latest chapter of Boruto definitely hit the mark. It's a lot like chapter 75 in that regard. And thematically speaking, this is actually one of the most well executed chapters in Blue Vortex thanks to my boy Kashin Koji, who I am very excited to talk about later on. But contrary to popular belief, this chapter is really not that crazy, or at least I don't think so, and I mean that in a good way. While not everything was directly or heavily foreshadowed, nothing introduced in this chapter breaks the mold of what's been established so far, and none of the so-called crazy revelations in this chapter are a plot twist like a lot of people say, and I want to take a minute to explain why. A plot twist is a storytelling device where the author leads the reader in one direction, believing a certain idea to be the truth of the series, and then radically shifts the plot into another direction, leading to a different outcome from what was initially expected. For example, Itachi being a double agent and actually being a good guy. While the foreshadowing is there, you are still led to believe that Itachi is an evil maniac who killed his clan just to test the limits of his abilities and to acquire the eternal Mangekyo Sharingan, because you are shown everything through Sasuke's perspective, rather than Itachi's, Danzo's, or Obito's. So when Obito reveals the truth about Itachi, the plot or the truth of the series is shifted in a radically different direction. For another example, Black Zetsu being Kaguya's will, not Madara's will. This one wasn't executed as well as the Itachi one because the foreshadowing for the twist is almost non-existent, and how Black Zetsu even faked his creation without Madara noticing is absolutely ridiculous, but it's still a plot twist because you are led to believe that Black Zetsu is in fact Madara's will, because both Madara and Black Zetsu say he's Madara's will, and we even see the scene where Madara allegedly created Black Zetsu. So when Black Zetsu betrays Madara and reveals that he is actually Kaguya's will, the plot or the truth of the series is shifted in a radically different direction. By contrast, when it comes to Kashin Koji's future sight through the Jippo or 10 directions or prescience Shinjutsu, you are never led to believe that Boruto or Koji's source of information is anything other than that. You're not led to believe anything at all, and that's what's key. To be a plot twist, the plot needs to guide you in a certain direction that is different from the true direction, but that didn't happen in this particular instance. While it's true that many people theorize that Boruto had some premonition of the future, and that's how he knew everything that was about to happen, this story never led you in that direction. It was just a shot in the dark that made a lot of sense to some people. In fact, if anything, you were only led in Koji's direction. From the moment Koji and his toads were revealed, he has consistently been shown to seemingly be the strategist behind Boruto's every move, and Koji is actually the one who says that there was a high chance of this happening in reference to the Shinju awakening, implying that Koji expected this to happen. So truth be told, we were really just slowly building towards this revelation, rather than being led in another direction for a plot twist. This is not to say that this was a bad revelation or anything insulting to the series at all. I just find it a little annoying to keep seeing the term plot twist popping up all over the place when things aren't actually a plot twist, so hopefully this clears it up if you weren't sure. Moving on though, while we're on the subject, Kashin Koji is a freaking future sight Shinjutsu from Shibai. I absolutely love this for Koji. They gave this Shinjutsu to the absolute best character for it. Kashin Koji, the man who defied his fate against Shibai Otsutsuki, proving to the readers once again that fate is not something for the world to decide, it's something for you to decide. Your fate is not constrained by your genes. Now the reason this works thematically is due to the nature of how this Shinjutsu works. Known as Jippo or 10 directions, or prescience in the Viz translation, this Shinjutsu allows the user to see all possible futures, but as they move forward, they are changing their future at every crossroad. What this means is that the future is not set in stone. Every step you take, every decision you make, can greatly alter your future. This confirms something major about the Naruto universe. Unlike a series like Attack on Titan, the Naruto universe does not operate under a deterministic or linear timeline, where the future is set in stone, destined to happen a certain way, where characters will always make certain decisions that lead to certain outcomes. In Naruto and Boruto, There are several possible futures, and the future is always changing based on the various events that happen and choices the characters make. And this is actually one of the absolute best things they could have done for the Naruto franchise, because not only does it coincide nicely with Gamamaru's prophecies that seem to have more than one possible outcome based on the prophecy for Jiraiya, it proves Naruto right. Destiny isn't something for the world to decide, it's something for you to decide. Neji was not right in the Chunin exams, and Naruto was not destined to break the cycle of hatred. It was only one of many possibilities. The future is always changing. Your destiny is in your hands. Naruto forged his own future. I love this. Kashin Koji is hands down the best character, or at least one of the two best characters of Two Blue Vortex. I love this dude and everything he represents. It's absolutely insane to me how the two most well-executed themes of Two Blue Vortex are centered around Kashin Koji. What it means to be a ninja, and that your destiny is in your own hands. Coincidentally, two of the biggest themes in Naruto. If there's one character I can bank on being well executed in this story, it's definitely Kashin Koji. He's been amazing every step of the way. Awesome job. Another aspect of this that I really like is that at the end of chapter 4, Jura stated that Boruto can never escape his destiny, a similar philosophy to that of Momoshiki and Ishiki, which brings Jura into direct thematic opposition to Boruto and Kashin Koji, which is a really good and outright necessary thing for the story. Jura does unfortunately divert from this path in the same chapter a little bit, so maybe it's not as good as I'm making it sound, but either way I do think this is good when given the context of chapter 4. That being said, I do think they could have taken this a step further and integrated Kawaki into this a bit more seamlessly than they did with a very small rewrite, literally just tweaking 2 lines of dialogue. But I'm just gonna save that for another video because the explanation behind the rewrite raises a very interesting thematic and narrative discussion in my opinion, which I want to explain thoroughly because I think it would have been really good, and it also relates heavily to a theory I have about this worst possible future anyway, so I think it makes sense to lump those two topics together. Now, thematics aside, when it comes to the actual ability Koji possesses called prescience, much like Ada's Senrigan, this ability's greatest value lies in its ability to gather information, less in the sense of predicting the future, and more in the sense of gathering information that will be revealed in the future at an earlier point. While it can definitely help the user predict the future, because the future is always changing based on every single action every single person makes, it's impossible to guarantee which future is going to take place. However, that does not mean you can't learn new information from those future visions, especially if several of those visions contain the same information, and apply that knowledge in the present. And just like how Ada can project her consciousness into any past or present situation to gather information, Koji can seemingly do the same, but in future situations instead. This means that Koji is not limited to seeing his own future, and can actually see the futures of everyone else as well. This allows Koji to acquire information about other people from other people's futures, even if he would never witness those events himself. That is exactly the advantage Koji points out to Boruto, and that is actually how Boruto became so strong so quickly. Koji taught Boruto the skills and jutsu he would acquire in the future to the current Boruto, essentially Gon's transformation in the Chimera Ant arc of Hunter x Hunter, but without the consequences. It's a super cool and incredibly smart idea on Koji's part. In many ways, it's also very similar to Kakashi's Shadow Clone training method for Naruto in the Akatsuki Suppression arc, but Boruto and Kashin Koji style. Now, I can understand if a lot of people find this to be a cheap and unearned way for Boruto to get so strong, but personally, I'm okay with this since Boruto still had to train for these abilities, and they were all abilities Boruto was going to learn anyway, Koji just helping him learn them sooner, just like Kakashi with Naruto in the Akatsuki Suppression arc. It also seems to purely speed up the development of Boruto's skills, with no effect on the development of Boruto's power. In addition, it's also not Boruto who's in possession of the ability and just using it on himself. It's Kashin Koji using the ability to help Boruto get stronger, so it's not like a double whammy ability for Boruto or anything like that. Now, I'm not gonna say it's necessarily as earned as Naruto's training method in Shippuden, since unlike Naruto, we don't know if this training method requires more effort than normal training does. For all we know, it's just normal training, but we could skip the figuring it out stage, making the training actually easier, not harder. In Naruto's case, the training is harder, but he learns the skill faster as a result. It's kinda hard to imagine Boruto's training being harder, but I'll reserve my judgment until we see a flashback of what the training looked like, or some dialogue describing the training itself. Maybe due to not developing his body and power at the same rate as his skills, maybe the training becomes harder as a result. I could see something like that being a thing, and I think that makes reasonable sense. It's really gonna boil down to exactly how they present this training. If they gloss over it or make it look easy peasy, then yeah, I'm not gonna be the biggest fan. But if they make it look like a solid challenge for Boruto, then I'm totally cool with it. I just want it to feel earned and realistic, unlike Himawari's powers that she just awakened and seemingly mastered out of nowhere. Stepping back for a moment, a random detail I thought was hilarious was that after getting beaten up by Ishiki, Kashin Koji says, "I had no fear, nor any regrets. I could leave the rest to the Hokage." So the last thing Koji knew about Naruto was that he was sealed away by Jigen and being guarded by Boro. Like, Amato's whole plan and expectation that Koji was privy to was for Shikamaru to be acting as Hokage while Naruto was sealed away. He was literally surprised and happy to find out that Naruto had managed to escape, since that was even better than what he had planned for. So I'm really curious how Koji was expecting Naruto to save the day under these circumstances. Unless he meant he could leave the rest up to Shikamaru, you know, Shikadir, the guy who said, "I have no plan" in the anime. Maybe it was just the Jura and him that unconditionally believed in Naruto. Funny thing is, that actually wouldn't have been a bad plot point if this was actually intentional. But let's be real, Ikimoto forgot. Victor too. Bro literally forgot that Victor was a Kara member. Kashin Koji literally said every member of Kara receives Shibai cell transplants, or at the very least he's referring to the inner members here, which includes Victor. And we've been told like 50,000 times from every single character under the sun that Amato modified every member of Kara, and Kashin Koji even went out of his way to praise Victor's ridiculous regenerative abilities, which is why he used a particularly insane jutsu to counter that regeneration. So even if that regeneration isn't a Shinjutsu, Bro still got enhancements like everyone else, and he wasn't mentioned in the Shinjutsu group or the non-Shinjutsu group. So yeah, Ikimoto forgot. Chapter teasing aside, while we're on the note of the Kara members' abilities, it is interesting that every member of Kara was given Shibai cell transplants, not just because the goal was to manifest a Shinjutsu and Jigen wanted to dispose of every member who awakened those Shinjutsu, but also because of the actual abilities the other members possessed, specifically Victor, Boro, Delta, and Kawaki. I was actually working on a video explaining where these characters' powers actually came from, which would be the Ten Tails and or Divine Tree, but this chapter at face value seemingly indicates otherwise because they were all given Shibai cells. However, I'm not gonna jump the gun and assume I wasn't on the right track, because even though all of their abilities and their appearances were introduced to us while Kodachi was still writing, the fact is Hidari's wood-style abilities were introduced to us after Kodachi left, and Madara's healing abilities as a Ten-Tailed Jinchuriki were introduced to us before the Boruto series was even created, so I'm not too hung up on the Kodachi part. In addition, I think there are plenty of other factors to consider, so I still intend to make that video. I'll just integrate Shibai style stuff into the mix. Moving away from Kashin Koji's power itself for a bit, let's talk about that new Shinju Koji foresaw and the one that is being formed at the end of the chapter. While none of the Shinju look identical to their human counterparts, they all bear many similarities to the person whose chakra they're based on. For example, Hidari's claw mark cloak covers half of his face just like Sasuke's hair, Matsuri's claw mark jester hat thing is in a similar shape to Moeki's hairstyle, and Mamushi looks old and has a long beard and missing teeth just like Bug. And based on the new Shinju's appearance, the person he most closely resembles is Shinki. Now I've seen some people say he might be Naruto, and I'll admit I can see some of the resemblance because of Ikimoto's art style, but he definitely looks more like Shinki to me. Not to mention that he looks way too small to be Naruto, who would be the same size as Hidari and Jura. Now it is true that this new Shinju is in the very back, but unless Ikimoto's perspective shot is just inaccurate to his true size, he still looks to be taller than Mamushi, but shorter than Matsuri, at best being the same height as Matsuri, which would make sense for someone of Shinki's age. Now, separate from the Shinju and Kashin Koji's future vision is the discussion of what Shinju is being formed at the end of the chapter, because that Shinju doesn't inherently have to be the same as the one in Koji's vision, as there are countless future possibilities, and he's seen plenty that did not take place. And so, the Shinki Shinju panel could easily just be misdirection, in which case, the new Shinju could literally be anyone. Maybe it's Soegi, maybe it's a different character making their return to the series, or maybe it's a new character entirely. I'll make a separate video on who the new Shinju might be, but what I'll say for now is that there are actually a few possibilities, and I don't mean that because literally anyone in the world could be a treat right now. The obvious one being Shinki, and the others follow from the assumption that the Shinki Shinju panel is a reasonably executed red herring. That is to say, there is something in the story itself you can point to that could lead you to believe that another person might be the new Shinju if you weren't distracted by the Shinki Shinju panel. That's the whole point of a red herring, but more on that in that upcoming video. However, playing with the idea of a Shinki Shinju, this could easily be the most OP Shinju aside from Jura, depending on how they integrate his Iron Sand with his claw marks and wood style abilities, because think about it for a minute. Iron Sand is already OP as it is, both for offense and defense. You saw how strong Shinki was in the tuning exams. Now if you add wood style chakra absorption capabilities to that Iron Sand, now you essentially have an even more mobile, flexible, and sturdy wood style, and if you add claw mark teleportation abilities to that Iron Sand, now you also have flying mobile claw marks that can also be used for offense and defense. Imagine how ridiculous that would be. Now I'm not saying that they will do something like that. They could very easily just segregate all three abilities like they did with Hidari, where Shinki just uses the Iron Sand, claw marks, and wood style separately, but it would be super cool if they combined some of them together. I'm also very curious what the new Shinju's personality would be like if it is Shinki. I imagine his target would be Gaara or maybe Boruto, and I can imagine him wanting to fight strong people and taunting them when he beats their asses. He could easily become one of my favorite Shinju really quickly if he's got enough charisma about him. And while we're on the subject of the new Shinju at the end of the chapter, thank God they brought Hidari back. I was very worried they would actually kill him off. And for those of you who got all mad at me in my chapter 12 video, I really need you guys to understand the difference between a critique and a fear, and a prediction and a fear. The Hidari dying thing was very clearly a fear, not a critique. I can't critique something that hasn't happened. Likewise, I wasn't predicting Hidari would die, I was just concerned he would die. If Hidari had died, it would have sucked. That's all I was getting at. It's just like the end of part 1 situation. While I did predict that part 1 was ending based on the signs that were there, I also thought there was absolutely no way they would just skip multiple story beats and end the arc right then and there. Yet that's exactly what happened. So yeah, my fears are justified. In any case though, the worst possible future didn't happen, and Hidari is back. Now the scene showing Hidari heal reveals something very important to us, and I kinda gotta shoot myself in the leg for not finishing several of these videos I started months ago because now we're just getting reveal after reveal pertaining to those topics, but like I mentioned in my chapter 12 video, the two mechanisms for which I proposed the Shinju being formed were either that the divine tree in that dimension forms the Shinju itself based upon the chakra it stole from those humans in the form of a thorn soul, or it would feed that thorn soul to a claw grind, an evolved claw grind in particular, and then that claw grind would transform into the Shinju we see now. Obviously it was the former and not the latter in the end, which I'm okay with but slightly disappointed because it really feels like the claw grind were like 80% pointless at this point. All they did was turn a few people into trees, and the one soul evolved claw grind we saw was just to demonstrate the fact that the Ten Tails itself was evolving, but that's about it. I just feel like we could have done more with these guys, but maybe they will in the future, though I'm pretty skeptical about that at this point. But in light of how it actually works, some people might still say it's kinda dumb that the Shinju can't heal on their own like the Ten Tails and Ten Tails Jinchuriki can, but I think there's a way to explain it that at least somewhat makes sense. The first thing to note is that, as surprising as this might sound, Hidari doesn't have Ten Tails chakra, only Sasuke's. Blasphemous, I know, but it's literally true. When Hidari entered the Leaf Village, he registered as a perfect match to Sasuke Uchiha's chakra signature, which wouldn't be the case if he had Ten Tails chakra in the mix. That's also why Hidari couldn't sense Kurama's chakra like Jura could, because Hidari doesn't have Biju chakra like Jura does. This means that the divine tree, just gave Hidari a body, but not any of its chakra. He only has what's in the Thorn Soul from Sasuke, and as we know, Sasuke lacked any healing or regenerative abilities, so Hidari doesn't have them either. With that in mind, just as how Kakashi and Shikamaru and everyone else in the war arc can't just regenerate the Nine Tails chakra Naruto shared with them during the war on their own, and instead would need Naruto to share Kurama's chakra with them again, Hidari can't just regenerate the body the Divine Tree gave him on his own, and instead needs the Divine Tree to give him a body again. You might not like it, but I do think it makes enough sense. Now there's a couple other interesting details from this final scene with the Shinju as well. The first is another exemplification of Jura's contradiction, which is that he recognizes that Hidari already has an identity, yet tells Hidari, himself and the others, that following their instincts to devour their targets like a Ten-Tails is what will lead to the formation of their identities, and Jura is seemingly blind to this contradiction, to his hypocrisy, and that's a good thing. I will continue to double down on my Jura character analysis for my chapter 11 video, and eventually I'll make a more in-depth video wholly dedicated to Jura as a character. What's also interesting is that Jura says, "Now, what to name you?" implying that Jura is the one who gave all the Shinju their names, which is extremely fitting for the man who both recognizes the Shinju's individual identities, yet almost assigns them an identity by naming them and telling them how they can form their identities, rather than letting them walk that path on their own. This is really good. In addition, given that Jura told Matsuri to harvest the new Thorn Soul, I'm doubling down on my chakra fruit comparison, where I said Hidari's Thorn Soul is essentially Sasuke's chakra fruit, as everyone consistently uses the word harvest when talking about plucking a chakra fruit. Furthermore, given that Matsuri asked, "Isn't it time, for that?" and Jura said, "Fine, harvest it," this sort of implies that a certain amount of time is needed in order to amass enough chakra to produce a Thorn Soul, which begs the question of how each Shinju is chosen and in what order. Is it random? Is it based on how long that person has been a tree for? Is it based on the amount of chakra the tree person has? Is it based on the quality of that person's chakra? Is it based on how strong that particular claw grind was, meaning evolved claw grind makes stronger Shinju and those Thorn Souls get produced first? Do the Shinju just pick and choose who they want to become the next Shinju? While I don't think these all have an equal likelihood of being the case, I do think they are all possible, though the amount of time that person has been a tree is probably the least likely, given that Matsuri was one of the first Shinju to form despite Moegi becoming a tree during Code's invasion, only a short while before Matsuri was born. Whatever the case, it's an interesting question you should keep at the back of your mind. Now the last thing about this scene is the fact that Matsuri is seemingly controlling this Thorn Soul harvesting process, which begs the question of whether Matsuri alone has this power, or if all the Shinju or the Divine Tree itself can do this, and Matsuri just happens to be the one doing it now because she's particularly interested in seeing the new Shinju, and as of right now, I will lean towards the latter, as otherwise Matsuri would have had to have been the first Shinju to be born, which I kinda doubt is the case, and that also wouldn't explain how she was born in the first place unless the Divine Tree could do it on its own. So I'm inclined to believe that the Divine Tree just does its thing and the Shinju can just pluck the Thorn Soul whenever they feel like it, which is exactly what happened here. Long story short, I don't think this is Matsuri's special power or anything like that. And while we're on the subject of Matsuri, I want to know what the heck this research of Matsuri's even was.
Research. Yes, research.
How does she even figure out that Boruto has an ally when Jura seemingly couldn't, even though he's heard Boruto talking to a toad and the toad talking back to him on more than one occasion? I'm really curious what she actually did. I also want to know what the heck Mamushi was doing all this time as well. Was he just chilling in the tree dimension while everyone else was at work? Was he spying on Ada and Damon? I want answers. Oh, and by the way, Bo's Shinju name is Mamushi. I don't know why they didn't just say his name in chapter 5 like everyone else. But regardless of what he was doing and how Matsuri acquired her intel though, I do think they should have added a vague line in chapter 8 when Jura and Hidari invaded the village where Jura says something like, "It's time. Come, Hidari. Matsuri, Mamushi, carry out your duties as well." Or, "Matsuri, Mamushi, I look forward to hearing your results as well." something to indicate that Matsuri and Mamushi are doing something to explain why they aren't going after their targets like Jura and Hidari. Especially since Matsuri's target was literally fighting Hidari, and Matsuri could have very easily popped in and devoured him off guard at any time. Telling us that she was doing research after the fact doesn't mitigate the fact that we had no idea where she was the entire arc, and we still don't even know what this research even was. So for all we know, she still could have popped in to devour Konohamaru at any moment. It would have been better to hint towards her research mission before the invasion rather than after the fact. Now as for Mamushi, it's a little more excusable since we never cut over to Ada and Damon at any point after Jura and Hidari invaded the village, so for all we know Mamushi was attacking his target and will just be shown this in a flashback. For Matsuri though, it doesn't work because we saw Konohamaru fighting Hidari the whole time, so we know she wasn't there attacking her target. In any case though, stepping away from the Shinju for a minute, I like the fact that Konohamaru put Boruto in special Amato-made handcuffs that prevent him from using any jutsu, with the intent of dragging out the intel he possesses, which means Boruto is going to actually answer his interrogator's questions this time around, unless Shikamaru makes a plan to help Boruto get out of this situation. But even Shikamaru wants his intel too, and Boruto never told him how much he knows when Shikamaru asked him in chapter 8, so I'm not even sure if Shikamaru will help him out on that account. I'm sure he'll help keep him from being assassinated and whatnot, but he's still gonna want to drag the intel out of Boruto, which means Boruto might have no choice but to reveal Kashin Koji's involvement in everything, which Kawaki has already seemingly figured out, given that he recognized Kashin Koji's toe when he pulled it off of Boruto, though he chose not to say anything about it at the time. Now, if Boruto or Kawaki do spill the beans on Kashin Koji, I'm very curious what Amato's reaction to this would be, as he seemed to be of the belief that Koji would die, and there's no indication as of yet that he ever discovered that Koji escaped from Ishiki alive. I'm also curious what his reaction would be to discovering that Koji awakened a Shinjutsu, the 10 directions or prescience Shinjutsu in particular. That's something major I'm extremely excited to see in the upcoming chapters, assuming Amato gets to hear the interrogation of Boruto, or if anyone gives him secondhand information after the fact. I'm always down for an Amato-focused chapter. Another person whose thoughts on Koji's prescience Shinjutsu I think would be insanely cool to see is Momoshiki. If you recall, when Amato was talking about all this Shinjutsu stuff in chapter 75, Momoshiki was the one pointing out the flaws in Amato's explanation because he had never heard of a love charm Shinjutsu before. So I'm curious as to whether Momoshiki will or won't recognize this prescience Shinjutsu if you get to see his thoughts on the matter. Of course, I'm sure most people want Momoshiki's return to be a flashy takeover Boruto and wreak havoc type of return, but honestly at this point I'll take what I can get. If Momoshiki has to suss out someone to make an appearance, so be it. I just want to see this dude come back already. Granted, I could also see him purposefully not thinking about the situation so that his thoughts don't cross over with Boruto's again, so I'm not saying this is necessarily a likely event, I just think it would be cool. Speaking of Momoshiki though, what's interesting to me is that Boruto isn't auto-healing from his karma seal, nor is Momoshiki healing Boruto for him to make sure he doesn't die, which would kill Momoshiki too. He's just lying on the ground helpless, and it's not like Boruto needs to activate his karma seal for this healing to occur, as the karma seal was deactivated when he healed for the first time in chapter 30, which Koji picked up on. Assuming Momoshiki has to be the one to initiate this healing effect, this makes me wonder what's going on with Momoshiki. Is he like deactivated in there or something? Does he just not care if Boruto dies now? Does he want Boruto to die? You could argue he just thought this was a petty injury and Boruto would be just fine, but it was somehow bad enough to leave Boruto helpless on the ground, and if Jura landed another shot, Boruto likely would have been killed. So it would absolutely be in Momoshiki's best interest to heal Boruto, so he can flying Raijin away or at least dodge the next shot. But he didn't, and I want to know why. I want to know what the deal with Momoshiki is right now, and hopefully we'll get some answers pretty soon. Now, most of what I've talked about so far are either plot developments or thematic elements I found very interesting and enjoyable. However, there are a couple of things in this chapter I was not a big fan of, two of which I'm just going to save for their own videos because I think there are a good lesson in connecting plot and story, as well as touching on some thematic execution as well. But the third one I'll just briefly explain here, and it has to do with Himawari. And before you attack me in the comments and call me a Himawari hater, please just listen. It's not about the plot point, It's about the narrative reason behind the plot point. That's my issue. Himawari can apparently already use her healing powers on command in her base form, and even in this state, her healing powers are very remarkable. And I'm gonna be honest, I don't like this. Kurama just shows up out of nowhere after hiding for at least 3 years, then he introduces a character flaw that Himawari needs to overcome in order to use his power, a character flaw that Himawari never had in the past, and in fact is in opposition to her characterization in the manga and especially the anime, where Himawari has seemingly always believed in herself. And rather than overcoming the character flaw that Kurama mentioned, she gained access to Kurama's power via half-assed rage that seemingly acted as a temporary workaround, essentially bypassing her need to overcome her flaw in this particular fight against Jura. With that in mind, Himawari shouldn't be able to permanently use his power without either overcoming that flaw or raging to bypass that flaw. But now she's apparently able to use this power to heal others without overcoming her flaw or raging. So this is quite literally the most unearned power ever. It's not about training or needing to befriend Kurama. Naruto already did the work for her. It's about the character flaw that was introduced during the fight, one that Kurama said Himawari needed to overcome if she wanted to use his power. It would have been fine if the whole "you just gotta believe in yourself" thing wasn't a factor, but it was.
You just gotta believe in yourself. You just gotta believe! I believe.
So if they wanted Himawari to be able to use his power on command now, or at least to some extent, I think they would have been better off if Kurama was just dormant all this time and was only awakened due to Himawari's exploding rage, where we would then get Kurama's perspective after the fact, where he probably would have not been expecting all of this and would instead be making inferences about what happened, which then fixes the fact that he told Naruto not to join him too soon, only to reveal that he always knew he was going to come back, meaning Naruto was never going to join Kurama if he died. In this alternate version, I'm not going to say it's the world's most hard work earned power known to mankind, but at least it doesn't go against anything. She simply awakened the dormant Kurama through her rage, a level of rage she has never experienced before, certainly not between now and the time when Naruto lost Kurama. And let's be real, we're not losing anything by doing this. It's not like Kurama the character actually did anything of value during the Jura fight. Himawari's affinity and the theory behind Kurama's return can wait for literally any other chapter. It's not like they actually gave a real answer anyway. And Kurama's teaching moment for Himawari was rendered null and void by her awakening the power through rage instead of believing in herself. And she only started to believe in herself again once she awakened Kurama's power, indicating that she doesn't believe in herself, but Kurama instead. So we can just scrap this idea entirely. It's really the whole believe in yourself thing that's holding us back. That's not to say that's a bad character arc, but when you give it to someone who doesn't need it and let her reap the benefits of that character arc without even actually overcoming the flaw they needed to overcome, it's just not gonna sit right. There's plenty of things they could have done after the fact instead. And I know it seems like I've been picking on Himawari a lot lately, but I really do like her as a personality. She's extremely sweet and she's really funny in the anime. I even like the concepts behind what they've been doing with her. I just don't like how Two Blue Vortex is executing those concepts. Anyway, I think that's a good place to end this review. There was definitely a lot to say with this chapter, so let me know what you guys think about everything I said in the comments below. Thanks for watching till the end. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time.